Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special guest joining us today. He is a friend of the show, and he's as good as it gets when it comes to college football. He's been covering the sport nationally for over 20 years, and he is currently the National College Football Insider for The Athletic, along with being a reporter for Fox College Football. Ladies and gentlemen, friend of the show, Bruce Feldman. Bruce, how's it going?
It's going good. Good to be on with you today.
Yes, sir. Always happy to have you on. We had you on earlier in August, and me and you both hopped in the batter's box, and there were some things that we were definitely pretty correct on, and some things that we look back on and say, man, it's week 12 of college football. We're moving on right now. And I look at Ohio State. This has been the one consistent, if you look at this entire college football landscape with the ups and downs, the twists and turns, whether it's Arch Manning in Texas, Cade Klubnik and Clemson, you name it. Ohio State has been consistent all year long, and they've been the number one team all year long. And there's been some chatter going around whether people think they're a little overrated. They haven't necessarily had that tough test yet, and I don't think I'm on that bandwagon right now, but I'm curious. When you watch Ohio State, it seems like they're just so great defensively with Matt Patricia. They obviously have loads of talent offensively. When you look at Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, and obviously Julian Sayin, where are you at with Ohio State right now? Is it just they are the clear-cut favorite to win it all, or do you have any sort of question marks about this team?
I think they're the clear-cut favorite because they're so balanced. They're really good on defense. We knew Caleb Downs coming into the year. Arvell Reese, a linebacker, has emerged as a superstar there. I think Matt Patricia's done a good job. They have a lot of experience on the back end. The defensive line, where they had to replace a lot of guys, has stepped up. I really love the passing game because how could you not? You
Yeah.
have two elite wideouts, as you mentioned. You have a really good tight end, Max Clare. You have, I think, a better passer than what they had last year with Will Howard and saying. The run game is the one area where I'm like, okay, that's the area where they're not as good as they were last year. But I think you're seeing a team playing with a lot more confidence at this point now than they were at that point last year. I don't know who challenges them. I'm interested to see if they do play Indiana in the Big Ten title game. Indiana's obviously playing really well. They had the close call last week at Penn State, but made the plays when they need to. I don't know who I would say is the best team in the SEC. It feels like it might be Texas A&M, but similar to Ohio State, I feel like we need to see more from them. It's just I feel like based on the track records of the program, and one just won a national title and the other, it feels like it's been underachieving for like the last 50 years as A&M. Now, it's not fair to put that on Mike Elko, but I think if you ask me right now, if I had to pick one team I think will win the national title, Ohio State would be the clear, easy choice for me to say.
Yeah, I would agree with you. It's hard to go anywhere else. I mean, I look at Alabama and what they've done since week one, being one of the hottest teams in college football, and I do appreciate what they've done, especially with how loud it got after the loss to Florida State. I've been really impressed with Ty Simpson. They've been really good over there. I agree with you with the Texas A&M point where it's like I want to see more for Marcel Reed. I felt like he was going to take this huge jump in year two, but it's like, what is that going to look like in the college football playoff and potentially in the SEC championship? So I'm excited to see what we get from the SEC. But yeah, I think we're going to get a great game between them and Indiana. And it's funny because those are your two Heisman front runners right now. And it was hilarious because I was looking on Twitter a few days ago, or it was maybe a few weeks ago, and I was looking at all the stats, and all of a sudden Julian Sayin had become the favorite to win the Heisman. And I was like, hold up a minute. He's all of a sudden the favorite to win the Heisman. Like, I feel like he's quietly just had this ridiculous year because Ohio State hasn't necessarily played all these ranked opponents. They haven't gone through this gauntlet like every single SEC team does every single week. But yet Julian Sayin has just been so consistent, completing over 80% of his passes. He has been, to your point, one of the best passers in the country. And when you look at him, when you look at Mendoza, those are the two odds-on favorite right now to win the award. And then you look at Marcel Reed and Ty Simpson. Where are you at with this Heisman race? Because it feels like it is still so tight. It still feels like it's going to come down to who can really close the stretch the strongest, and also who's going to ultimately come out on top in either the Big Ten championship or the SEC championship. Where do you sit with this really tight Heisman race?
Yeah, I don't think there's a clear front runner at this point, because on one hand, Sands been super impressive. On the other hand, I think most people are like, he's not even the best player in the program, the most outstanding player. And that's the word that, the one word that comes up with the Heisman is most outstanding player, is Jeremiah Smith. I don't think Jeremiah Smith's going to win the Heisman because Carnell Tate's really, really good. And even though he missed a game, he's still, putting up big numbers. And you're looking at who's operating the system. On the other side of it in the SEC, I think you have a few guys in there. Ty Simpson for sure. I think depending on how it goes, down the stretch, I think there'll be some support. Um, when you remember how bad Vandy was before Diego Pavia showed up, they could make the playoff, and I think there's a chance he could definitely be in the mix and even take some votes away from Simpson, depending on how that goes. And then obviously Mendoza's had a terrific season and had that touchdown drive, in the last minute at Penn State against a talented defense. He got sacked on the first play and shook it off and ended up making some clutch plays and obviously had a great catch by his receiver, Omar Cooper Jr. at the end of it. Um, we'll see. Does anybody sneak in there at the end to make a fast finish? I don't know. It's like, does Jeremiah Love have a 250-yard game to all of a sudden get back into the mix? It's to me, it's pretty wide open right now. I feel like there's nobody who's like, oh yeah, this guy's kind of running away with it at this point, and we're in mid-November.
Yeah. If you had to give your vote to someone right now, who would you give it to? I think for me personally, I think I would give it to Ty Simpson. I feel like when you look at the Heisman, to your point, it's the most outstanding player. And I'm not trying to take anything away from Julian Sand because he's been magnificent this year. But I look at obviously how great that defense is playing. I look at Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate, and I think that almost takes a little bit away from what he's doing. Not to say he hasn't been one of the best quarterbacks in the country, but I look at Ty Simpson and almost the storyline on the season, losing in week one, everybody talking about the Kalen DeBoer buyout, everybody saying that this was a team that all of a sudden is going to implode, and for them to have won out, for them to have won against so many ranked opponents, for him to still be putting up the stats necessary to be a Heisman contender, I feel like he gives you a little bit of everything. Whereas Indiana, yes, they have the win against Oregon, and I do think that's great, and you've got the Mendoza stats, but I think Alabama, with the strength of schedule, the statistics you get from Ty Simpson, I'm leaning more towards him. Where do you lean right now as we head into week 12?
I'm not sure. It's a TBD for me right now because Simpson has had a terrific season for them, no doubt, and he kind of rescued them, I felt like. Um, Marcel Reed has a chance late in the year. They play Texas. No, it's not like, Texas has a good defense, not a great defense. But I think if they're undefeated, watch out for Marcel Reed to close fast. The piece where it could go for Mendoza is if they end up beating Ohio State in the Big Ten title game, I think he'll win the Heisman off that because he does have a good road win against Oregon. And if he can beat the number one team in the country, where I think a lot of people, he's going to come into that game as an underdog. I think I could see that would take all the chips on the table in that voting block for the in that Big Ten area, and I think a lot of people will watch that game. Whereas in the SEC, I think you have three guys for sure with Simpson, with Reed and Pavia to some extent. I think they could split a bunch of it, and that's also, again, I don't know. Ty Simpson could emerge as the main guy in the SEC, but right now I'm not sure he's gonna get the biggest pull from it. So I think there's just so much football left to be played. It's gonna change.
Yeah, I agree. It seems like who's gonna have their Heisman moment late, who's gonna have the big game in the championship game, whether it's the Big Ten or SEC, for all four of those quarterbacks that are up there. I feel like the ACC. We talked about this coming into the year. It was like Clemson was the above and beyond team that was going to just run away with the ACC. Me and you both thought that. I was sky high on Clemson this year, and you look at the just the current state of the ACC, and you're like, what just happened? And Miami's currently the highest ranked team, yet they need a ton of help to get into the ACC championship. To you right now, looking at the current landscape with where Miami's at, looking at the entire ACC landscape, if Miami wins out and doesn't play in the ACC championship, does the committee get them in, or how do you see that kind of shaping out with just the entirety of the ACC right now?
I think 10-2 Miami with a win against Notre Dame, and depends on how it goes with USF down the stretch, because USF, they blew them off the field and they may make the playoffs. So I think if they had two close losses, it's not a perfect resume. But again, they have a really, really good win, especially if Notre Dame goes 10-2. I don't know how you could leave Miami out at 10-2 and have Notre Dame in at 10-2,
Yep.
because it's not like Notre Dame's going to have a great body of work. They would have a USC win, and if USC, unless USC is in the playoff, they're going to be at best 9-3, if they, assuming they lose to Oregon in a couple of weeks. Whereas the other team in the ACC that I think bears keeping an eye on is Georgia Tech. Now they got to play Georgia later in the year, Thanksgiving weekend. They gave Georgia all they could handle. It was like that 8 overtime game
Yeah.
last week. I trust Haynes King probably as much as I trust anybody in the ACC. If they beat Georgia, they're going to the playoff. If they don't, and they end up 10-2 and kind of in that same predicament, then I think Miami's going to be ahead of them because they already are, and that's assuming if Miami runs the table. Miami would have to beat Pitt. Pitt has Notre Dame this weekend. We'll see what Pitt's record looks like at the end of the year, but that could be a good win for Miami. I just think that of the teams in this group, it's so weird because you have a Duke team that looked horrible in the non-conference. They got beat up by Tulane. They have a couple of bad losses, but they only have one loss currently in the ACC, so they're still in the ACC title mix or title game mix. It just kind of I think shows how suspect the whole ACC is right now.
So do you feel like if Miami doesn't get into the ACC championship, let's just say that pandemonium happens and you've got two teams that are maybe fringe top 25 teams in the ACC championship, do you think the ACC is even guaranteed to get a team into the college football playoff right now?
Again, if Miami loses, I think then they would be out of it. But Miami's sitting at 15 right now. I don't think they're going to go any lower than that because teams in front of them are going to end up falling probably. And there's at least a couple of them that play head to head. So if they win out, I think Miami's got a pretty good chance to end up in the playoff at 10-2 again, because they have a good non-conference schedule. I mean, if you look at it, they play Notre Dame, they play a really good group of five in USF. Now they already thumped Florida. Now Florida didn't have a good year, but Florida actually beat one of the top 15 teams, from the from the SEC. So I think it's like hard for the committee to go, wait a minute, you actually schedule one of the toughest uh, non-conference schedules. You did well in it, and then we're still going to punish you for the season in total. So that's why I think they would probably get in at 10-2.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you there. I think the biggest thing that I'm looking at in the playoff and that I can't get over, and I do understand why they did it, is I don't necessarily agree with Notre Dame being as high as they are. I know a lot of people are like, well, they had the two tough games at the beginning of the year, but they've been winning out. And I'm like, to your point, USC right now is their only good win that they have. They've got to go on the road and beat Pitt, but realistically, they're like a 2 touchdown favorite almost to beat Pitt, and they'll have two ranked wins, two teams that might not even be inside of the top 20 when it's all said and done. Do you feel like that there should be a three, because this is a scenario that I just kept coming up with in my head where I'm like, Texas, They might have three losses when it's all said and done. They might be 9-3. Do you think there's almost like a little bit of, hey, we should put a three-loss Texas team in over Notre Dame? Or do you think we should maybe look at Oklahoma with the amount of ranked teams that they've played and the difficulty of this schedule? Are you looking at potentially the first three-loss SEC team or just three-loss team in general getting into the playoff over a Notre Dame team that doesn't necessarily have a resume that just blows you out of your socks?
I don't think so with Texas, just because they're losing to Ohio State on the road, no shame in that, especially for the first time out. You have a really inexperienced offense. The other loss is a tough loss to have on your resume. And you add a third, whether it's to Texas A&M or to Georgia, you're really not going to have a great body of work to offset. You could have two losses where you're like, oh, those are top 10 teams you lost to, even top five teams. It's the other loss that I think is hard for them to kind of write off, right? And so I think there's going to be enough. If you ask me right now, I would say here are the ones who are borderline locks to get in the SEC from the SEC. Texas A&M, Ole Miss, like those I feel like are definitely going in just because they would have to have an epic meltdown both sides to not get in, given who they're playing, especially Ole Miss. Then you factor in, let's say Georgia beats Texas and Georgia beats Georgia Tech, which I think will happen both of those things. Georgia's in. Now we're starting to look at, now you have three without getting into Texas, and you still have
Alabama.
um, Alabama, which is looking really good right now. So that gets you up to four. The idea of getting five, especially if you're a three-loss team, like if Vandy ends up running the table and winning at Tennessee, they're going to be 10-2. I don't think you're taking a I don't think you would take a 9-3 Texas with one bad loss over a 10-2 Vandy. Um, there's somebody else I'm forgetting who's also like still hanging around in there
We've got
that would have
Oklahoma. We've got Oklahoma at
Oklahoma.
7-2
Yeah,
right
I
now.
feel like Oklahoma's probably, the schedule is still pretty rough. I feel like Oklahoma won't be they'll probably be at least a three-loss team. But my point is, you have four pretty strong chances to get in there without even Vandy or without even Oklahoma. That's why I just don't think, unless, if Texas runs a table, absolutely. But if they get a third loss, I just think there's going to be four teams from the SEC will probably be ahead of them.
Yeah, it seems like you kind of give yourself that kiss of death once you get that third loss, no matter which conference you're in. And in the SEC over the last 2 years, I mean, it has just been Armageddon with the amount of great teams that you have. And Texas, they've been heating up over the last 4 weeks. Two wins inside of the top 10. That huge 17-point comeback against Mississippi State. Yeah, go ahead.
I think we also, like, if you look at it last year, so Ole Miss had the bad losses late in the year. Alabama had the bad loss again. I mean, they just got embarrassed by a pretty mediocre Oklahoma team. I thought that kind of did them in. In the case of, Texas, you lose to Florida, and
Yeah.
Florida may be 4-8. They may be 3-9. I think that's tough for people to overlook. It's one thing if you only have one, if that's your lone loss,
Yeah.
if that's your Northern Illinois or whatever. But if you have three losses and that's one of them, I think that's a hard sell. It's also going to be a hard sell if it's 9-3 Texas versus 10-2 Miami, and Miami has a Notre Dame win, but Miami also hammered the team you lost
That's
to
a good point.
in
Yeah.
Florida. So that's why I just think Texas, it's like they don't have. I don't think they really have any margin for error left.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you. And obviously they've got a huge one this weekend against Georgia, and then they'll have to beat A&M too. So still a ridiculously tough strength of schedule. That's the game you're playing when you're in the SEC every single week. You never know who you're going up against. We obviously saw LSU, who was one of the best teams in the country to start the year. They've completely fallen off. Everyone thought Florida was going to be there. Missouri's got the injury to Prabula. I mean, you just have guys everywhere. You have teams everywhere in the SEC. There's never a week off. Okay, so I guess to wrap this kind of fringe playoff team convo up, are you happy with where Notre Dame is right now? 11 weeks in, ninth in the country. I'm not satisfied with it. I don't think they should be over Miami, and I understand they've won all these games. I think Miami should absolutely be ahead of Notre Dame. Where are you at with your satisfaction level there?
Yeah, I think Notre Dame should be in the 14-15 range.
Yeah.
I definitely don't think they should be ahead of a team that beat them that has the same record. To me, that doesn't make sense. It's not like, as you said, their best win is against USC. USC came to Notre Dame. It's not like they've run this gauntlet. Their schedule, they have like you said, they have a interesting road win that, again, if Pitt ends up 9-3, that's one thing. If Pitt ends up, 7-5, then, it's not going to be a ranked win. It's an okay win, but that's why I think Notre Dame, I feel like to a large degree is riding some benefit of the doubt from making it to the title game last year. I
100%.
just I think that's whether the committee would ever admit that or not. I feel like that's got to be part of why they're 9 without great wins.
Yeah, and also they didn't really penalize them that much after they lost the first 2 weeks of the season. I can't remember what their initial ranking was here. I'm pulling it up real fast. Let's see. Week 3, after they started 0-2, the committee had them at, let's see here. Sorry, that was week 3. The committee had them at they had Notre Dame at 24th. And so I was like, okay, you're still in the top 25 after starting 0-2. And you looked at that schedule, and at the time, USC was just 25th in the country. Pitt wasn't even sniffing anything. And that was only one ranked team that they had to play at home. And so you felt like Notre Dame, if they ran the table, they had a really good shot. So I think Notre Dame, to your point, is riding the benefit of the doubt of getting to the championship game. I want to talk about a little quarterback play here. It felt like coming into this year, there were quarterbacks you look left and right that you felt could go number 1 overall, whether it was Klubnik, whether it was Nussmeier, whether it was Aller. You had so many guys everywhere that it was like, this guy can be the number 1 overall pick. This guy will be a first round pick. And it feels like this has been kind of an underwhelming year at the quarterback position. You've had some guys like Ty Simpson, Dante Moore, Julian Sand, Fernando Mendoza. When you look at the draft, I know we're a little early. Who is your quarterback 1 right now that you've just been blown away by? You love everything they can do, and you think an NFL franchise needs to build around this player?
Right now, there isn't that guy. I could talk myself into Ty Simpson. You want to see a lot more. This is not even a full season of it. I thought he's been very impressive. Another name you could throw in the preseason mix, and I wouldn't totally write this guy off, but it's been a struggle, is Lenoris Sellers. I mean, he's got no help, and he's a guy that I could see being a first round quarterback. I don't know if I see a guy who's like, you could talk yourself into making him the first pick of the draft. I know how that's how it works with quarterbacks. Like Dante Moore, I think comes back to Oregon for another year.
You do.
I think he's done some really good things. I don't think he's in a rush. From everything I've heard from the people inside Oregon and the people connected to him, it seems like they're willing to let him keep developing. Mendoza will be in this draft. I could see him being a first round pick. I don't know if he's a top 5 pick, but he does enough with his legs and they use him enough where he's definitely no dual threat guy. But I think there's enough where if you're comfortable with the personality and you see what you like what you see on film. And again, he's had some moments where he's shown to be very resilient. And I think that's a great chip in his pocket to have when he gets evaluated. So we'll see. Again, there's some other guys in there that I wouldn't totally give up on. Sellers would be the one just because he's got a lot of physical traits that coaches are going to really like. It's just he's still got to develop more, and I don't know how that fits. Nussmeier's had a tough year. Klubnik's had a brutal year.
Yeah.
Drew Aller's obviously coming off an injury. I'm interested to see how this thing keeps going. I'm sure that there'll be some quarterback that we're thinking of, but probably we're not thinking of in that context, that probably will rise up the board, maybe get in the Senior Bowl and be like, oh, this guy's actually, some people think he can be a starter in the NFL. It doesn't mean there'll be a first round pick, but this year has been underwhelming, right? Carson Beck's another one who's like, he hasn't had a bad year, but I think he had a bad game against Louisville. But again, somebody I think could. There's still a playoff to see. Is there a guy who kind of gets hot and starts to flash at that point? I just don't feel like there's the guy with the wow physical tools who's had that spectacular year though.
Yeah, I agree. Another guy that came to my mind too while you were saying that was Sam Levitt as well. He was another guy that with the season Arizona State had last year with the healthy Jordan Tyson, you felt like this was going to be both of their years to emerge as top picks in the draft. And obviously they both struggled with injuries. And I think Tyson has emerged as the probably the wide receiver one in my opinion in this year's NFL draft. He's been unbelievable. Yeah, the guy that I keep thinking of is Dante Moore. I've just talked myself into it more and more with him, completing over 70% of his passes. He's big, 6'3", 206 pounds. I think he has the best deep ball in the entire country. I watch him throw that thing down the field and think he is so money. And he shows off some of that mobility, the dual threat ability. He had that huge run against Iowa last weekend, nearly 50 yards. And he's got the clutch gene too, the game-winning drive, two huge drives in overtime against Penn State. I've really liked what I've seen from Dante Moore, but from the likes of what you're saying, it sounds like he's going to come back for another year. So I don't even think teams are going to be able to get him next season. But I've really liked Dante Moore. All right, last question for you really quick here. Let's talk sleepers. Are there any teams on the outside right now, maybe outside of the top 15, 16 range, on the outside looking in that you think can not only make the playoff, but can maybe win a game or two, go on a little bit of a run?
Ooh, you're making me go back past, because you have. I don't know about that because once you get past 15, you're talking about Georgia Tech. USC is interesting. They obviously would have to beat Oregon, and I don't think that's going to happen. Um, if USF is the playoff is representative from the group of five, Byron Brown is under the radar. I'm not saying he's going to be a great NFL quarterback, but he is a true dual threat who is strong and fast, and they have a lot of athletes around. I think they're a more dangerous team than Boise State was last year. I don't know if they could, depends on what the matchup would be if they got into it. They would be the group of five that I think could give people the most trouble because of him, because they have some good athletes on defense. And beyond that, I mean, once you get into 16 or below, USC does have a good offense, and I just don't think they're going to get in the playoff. And their defense is really inconsistent, but they've shown they can run the ball quite a bit, even with King Miller, the former walk-on, who's been phenomenal. I think he's still technically a walk-on, but they have like playmakers outside. I think Lincoln Riley's a good game planner and schemer, so I think they could be dangerous if they were to get in the playoff. I just don't think they're going to get in the playoff.
Yeah, that's the team that I keep thinking of too. Like I just get enamored with these big time offenses. I look at what Jaden Mayava's done this year. He's looked really good. He's had his stretches where it's like, the turnovers, the bad plays. I go back to that Notre Dame game and think there are a few plays there where USC had a major opportunity to win that football game, and it was the Makai Lemon interception, fumble, whatever it was, and then the Jaden Mayava interception as well. And that game was for the taking for USC, and then they lose on to a walk-off against Illinois. I think this is a team with how good of an offense they have. They can get up there and almost be like the Cincinnati Bengals last year, where it's like, let's ride this offense. Let's ride the quarterback's hot hand with two great receivers on the outside. But I think USC, to your point, they've got a really uphill battle right now. They got to go beat Iowa this weekend, and then they've got to go on the road and beat Oregon. Can they do that? If they can do that, they get in, and that would be wild if USC was able to turn that around and get into the playoff. But Bruce, I really appreciate you joining us. College football is swinging a hot bat right now. We've got a few weeks left. I cannot wait to see what ultimately transpires with the conference championships, who gets into the college football playoff, because it feels like this has been a college football year that is for the taking for anyone right now. I know we're looking at Ohio State and I know we're looking at Indiana, but I think there are a few teams that are up there that we wouldn't be shocked if they made the college football playoff and went on a deep run. But Bruce, I really appreciate you joining us today. Have a great rest of your day, my man.
You too. Always a pleasure, Ken. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir.